upon it in truth, in the tabernacle of David, judging and seeking judgment and hasting righteousness. We have heard of the pride of Moab. He is very proud, even of his haughtiness and his pride and his wrath. But his life shall not be so. Therefore shall Moab howl for Moab, and everyone shall howl for the foundations of Kiriath.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. Continuing today in the book of Isaiah, once again, chapter 25. We've actually been going through 25 at a pretty decent clip, as far as it's only been one day so far. And again, kind of wrapping up, as we said, from chapter 24, the Apocalypse of Isaiah, that there's no clear delineation that the thought process has changed at all, really. He just started praising God in the midst of, hey, the moon shall be confounded, the sun ashamed, and the Lord of hosts will reign in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem before his ancients gloriously. And on a completely different note, O Lord, thou art my God, I will exalt you. It's not clear that that's a chapter break. It's not at all clear. So, as far as that Isaiah, like when you have something like, you go back some of the other chapters, and I'm just talking, this is Bible study basics. And it's good to go over it. Again, 8-9 is a transition. It's obvious. They'll be driven to darkness, nevertheless. There's another I love that they're broken into small pieces. You don't have big, giant chapters. It's fine there's a chapter there, but just don't always allow you to think that means like, okay, new thought, chapter. It's like period, end of sentence. The Bible in its original writing didn't even have any punctuation, and actually didn't have spaces between words. It would just be like psh, letters, because that's how they used to write. Someone had to invent a blank space. Like, that was not a thing. You just wrote and then got to the end of a word and like, well, I'll start on the next word. And if you were used to reading words like that, you wouldn't think like, oh, we got to put a space in. Though honestly, it's astonishing to me that they didn't. Like, that wasn't an early thing. Like, the very first time someone started writing, so it wasn't like, so you have, for every word, you have a bunch of symbols. Why don't you just maybe put a little break between the symbols so I can, work on deciphering each group? But apparently not, Of course, a lot of early writing was like hieroglyphics, very obscure. But then, the earliest other writing I'm familiar with would be like Sumerian. Oh, well, cuneiform, I should say. But the Sumerian cuneiform. But like the border between chapters 12 and 13. There's a definite finality to chapter 12. It's actually going back to 11. And maybe even further than that. 11 is definitely like not an entire shift. Because there are some things where it's like, early on, we remember, if I go back to chapter, like, let's say, 7. This is an obvious new thing from whatever was going on before. This is like a definite reset, where he's saying like, here, that all the things said in 1 through 6, or or whatever. I'm not really thinking. 1 through 6 is kind of the introduction, and I don't think there's another in the days of, well, chapter 6 actually, in the year that King Ahaz died. But I always feel like that is the culmination of that first prophetic section, but that's purely a point of subjective, opinion, and that's fine. And same thing, and it's fine to have, those kind of opinions about the text because it's not a critical matter of faith. But when you're studying, you want to be aware. So, not necessarily a new chapter. We're continuing that same thought. And it said, and we had read through the entire passage at one point, and we talked about how destroying in this mountain, referring to Jerusalem. Almost, and that is, again, is it obvious? Is it obvious? Not entirely, I don't think. And if there's a the thing I would say is Isaiah, his point of reference is key. Because the whole time it's been about Israel. You know what I mean? And he has referred to other nations. But the central point is about Israel and Judah. And the things that would transpire there. And it's always been the focus of a lot of, that's why when, there's so many prophetic points where it's like the way Mystery Babylon in Revelation, if you're familiar with all the subject, there's a lot in common with many things said about Jerusalem in the Old Testament, which people sometimes get confused because, we inadvertently conflate heavenly Jerusalem, which is coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband, spotless and without blemish, the holy mother of us all, the woman of chapter 12 of Revelation, whom Mary also represented. Some people think that the woman of chapter 12 is Mary. No, Mary is the woman. That's the way. She is the woman in chapter 12 of Revelation, is the symbolic mother, the big overarch, because she's in the book of Revelation, and her name is not a young girl named Mary. People get that. But Mary, the reason people think that's Mary is because, Mary was that. She embodied that at some point when she gave birth to the Messiah. So, it's talking about Mary, but that does not mean that she is what that represents. I mean that she is the all. That's what people, because I don't usually go after Catholics, but I will go after certain thoughts. And the exaltation of that one person, almost deification of them, almost, because it's certainly not. I'm not going to make that accusation. But, it's certainly, I think, an inappropriate level of reverence for other people. But when you're in an organization that thrives on the reverencing of men, it's not surprising that you would have doctrines that exalt men. But the real girl, Mary, who gave birth to the child, that is so much of what Revelation 12 is about. So you don't wipe that out just because of differences of doctrine with other denominations. It's like it's okay to consider those things, because in that moment, just the way my beliefs about the two witnesses are that it's not going to be some superstars. It's like that people will embody those values by appearing as two witnesses in various points in time in which they carry out the functions. A long time ago, I started saying, because I realized, people want to claim to be this and claim to be that. Like, oh, I'm a prophet, and I'm an apostle, I'm and they say, you call yourself a teacher. And it's like, I never started off calling myself a teacher. That's not true at all. The way I got started teaching was through Bible study. And it was meant to be a Bible study. Where if you're familiar with Christian interactions, they all kind of talk to each other, and you're supposed to bring out questions. And there's a certain considered right way to do it. And the problem is, I'm highly analytical and very thoughtful and talkative, and also I had been intensively studying, and the kids around me were all these kids who were just grown up Christian, and they just were not into it. They didn't have the zeal of a convert, which I sort of had, oddly, because I'd come from, I'd grown up in the faith. I had not grown up in the church, that's for sure, and my heart was really much more after the carnal things of the earth than it was about the things of God. Though I believed in those things, but it was not in my immediate focus when I first became an adult. So it had to come into focus, and when it did so in a very powerful way, which made me very zealous, like someone who had been converted from atheism or something. Not quite actually that. I'm sure those guys sometimes do very amazing things, and they're very prominent. But the point about the studying, I forgot what I was getting at. I hate when I do that. It seemed like there was a really good point there. Oh, but the face of the covering and the prophecy in the Old Testament, New Testament. Okay, Mary. All very. See, it wasn't even about Mary to begin with, about studies to begin with, and it was all coming around. It usually does. The other thing is, it's when you look. For a second, it's like walking a tightrope sometimes when I get out an idea, because I want to quickly get into these verses, and we are. And you get out an idea a while, and it's like walking a tightrope. And you look down, you can get dizzy, and all of a sudden you forget where you are, and you fall off the wire. But the point is, God, in this prophecy here, is saying, we're going to destroy in the face of the covering cast over all people, and the veil that is spread over all nations, swallowing up death and victory. I was just connecting it all together. That's why it was. It was just connective tissue to bring all the studies together, everything we've been talking about. I think that's useful. Okay. I almost want to finish that point about the studying. It wasn't about me so much as I was using an example from my life where it illustrated to me a point about claiming to be teachers, claiming to be prophets. I don't want to miss this point. I'm glad I remember that. Everyone wants to make claims about themselves. But what I was saying a long time ago is that if you teach, you're a teacher. You are. You might be a really bad one. Might be a totally inept one. No, I don't claim to be a great teacher. I don't. What's that got to do with it? It's just I'm some kind of teacher. Because I'm doing teaching, so I'm some kind of teacher. I could be the worst teacher in the world, but I'd be a teacher. Some people I told one time someone told me a teacher, and I'm like, I'm a teacher too. But when they thought I was a school teacher, that's the only kind of teacher they respect. I'm like, that's funny because I don't disrespect school teachers, but your disrespect for me makes me feel, well, less than respectful. Let's say my respect is somewhat diminished in that for that individual, anyways. Because it's like, why not hear why someone, because someone you don't share the exact experience, you can't have the same thing. And same thing with a prophet. What makes a prophet is someone who prophesies. And when someone fulfills the roles, we brought her back around. For someone fulfills the roles of things written of in prophecy, like when Mary embodies the woman from Revelation 12, and that's written after her, obviously. But when people say, that's Mary, it's like just out of nowhere, just Mary. We're talking about the human being Mary now as Queen of Heaven, et cetera, as in the Catholic mythos she goes. That's where we were going with that? No. But that's what makes a prophet. That's what makes a two witness. The two witnesses are those who do the works that the two witnesses are supposed to do, and no one else. You know what I mean? Those who, Jesus even described himself on that same exact idea. It's like, if I had not done among them the works that no one else had ever done, then they'd had not sinned. But now they have no cloak for their sin. That's the Gospel of John. If they had there is a cloak for the sin. It's interesting, thing that their ignorance is a cloak for their sin. Just as when Jesus said blindness has happened to Israel in part. The blindness, that's the interesting thing about God is that he sends a certain kind of blindness into the world. And it's a weird, sometimes when bringing it all together, it is very hard in your mind to bring it all, to understand there is a very simple way of looking at things. Just as so many things in life seem simple, but on a certain analytical level, it's not that it's simple. It's just that from a certain perspective, it simplifies. Because if you get it in the right focus. Some objects are better viewed at a distance. Other objects are better viewed really close up. And the difference between that, but it's what about when you're trying to show something to someone and they just can't see it because they can't see? And this refers back, remember we mentioned chapter 6 again. And when Isaiah relates how he had been in the presence of God at some point, Or in the year that King Ahaz died. That part he was very clear about. It was the year that King Ahaz died. And I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lifted up. And then he goes, right? We read that, and then he gets the burning coal of fire put on his lips. This hath touched thy lips, thine iniquity is taken away, and thy sins purged. And also I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send? And who will go for us? Then said I, here am I, send me. And he said, go, and you tell this people, hear ye indeed, but understand not. And see ye indeed, but perceive not. Make the heart of this people fat, make their ears heavy, shut their eyes lest they see, and their ears that they hear, and or understand with their heart and be convert and be healed. Actually, I might have skipped ahead there. That's all right. I wanted to break out of that because I almost go into like a. I have to actually. If I'm going to recite a passage, I have to really focus. Anyways, so because I don't continually memorize things, because that would drive me insane. Well, I would love to just take up my time rereading the scriptures, but I don't have that kind of luxury in life. But thankfully, we get to take a little time every day rereading the scriptures and remembering them. I like remembering them even more sometimes. When I just remember a scripture that we weren't talking about. But the idea is we are talking about it, right? Because there's a connection. There is a covering that is cast over the nations, a veil that is spread. Both of ignorance and also it can represent also threat, because he does mention death. And I don't know if perhaps that the mystery of death and also of life, that's a funny that there's a mystery of both. We are in life and it's mysterious. And we know we shall die, and that is also mysterious. Because we do not know what this is about. And we don't know what that's about. But we think we do. We all think we do. It's funny that everyone thinks they have some notion of what that is, or many think they know. I mean, it's pretty obvious what it is. I mean, I think that first perspective of dead is dead is pretty conclusive as far as the basic nature of death. But then taking on the question of the nature of life, one comes to certain questions as to whether death must be the end. Whether is that the limit? Can nothing be again? I said, can the man who was ever rise again? Is that all? And there have been books, science fiction books, where they have kind of scientific resurrections of people, which is, I think, the theoretical possibility of such a thing. They wouldn't be resurrecting anyone from the past, because you'd have to have in place, I think in that they actually had the technology in place, so that's why they were able to recreate Abraham Lincoln and whatever. I forgot I forgot what the name of that book was. And say, well, you've read a lot of other books, Paul. I was like, yeah, well, my brain's been around. It's like sometimes I've cheated though in audiobooks. He would destroy this mountain the face of the covering. Yes, over all people. There's both a covering of fear, of ignorance, and that's primarily the things I think of. Because the idea of being covered is the idea of under a shadow. And though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I use that to, that's not meant to be like an interpretive, that's exact. But just to understand the kind of poetry used in the Bible. That's one of the uses of Psalms is by, we will go back to Psalms, I think after a short book after Isaiah. And then if there are not many left, well, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what we do. Don't know. But as I was talking about that, that mystery of life and a mystery of death. And I was thinking, they often talk about the problem of evil. I even did a video on the problem of evil. And I was thinking to myself the other night, I'm like, I should do something about the problem of good. Because there is another side to that coin that is not really given the same elevation. Because if there is a problem of evil, if evil presents a problem philosophically, when one considers the idea of a benevolent God, right? Like evil in the world becomes an issue. One has to, it becomes an issue one must, that begs explanation, right? Especially given a benevolent God, what then of all this evil? There's some, we all have explanations, or some people, various Christian opinion has, there's free will explanation, and there are other explanations, and then there's the predestination. And, depending on your perspective, you're going to need a different explanation to plug in there, right? But of course, there's only one right explanation. But beyond that, for the person who doubts the existence of God because of the problem of evil, they have a question to answer which they're ignoring. They ignore it, and we don't make them answer it. And it should be pushed as hard as the problem of evil. And as they as they become more powerful, the enemies of God have grown in power. And it's, of course, because God has given it to them to be more powerful, just like ever before in the Bible I've ever read. It's just, of course, they will grow in power. But as they grow in power, there will become, there will be more pressure on them. And it's like you can attack them at their beliefs. Because, what about good? Why should there be any good in the world at all? Why is it not just only evil? I don't mean in the world in just the universe. Why is there something at all to even consider? And that is a question that does get brought up. But that's what it is. It's the problem of good. There is a problem there. They don't want to acknowledge it. But it is as much a problem to the question of, does God exist? When you, no, because evil. It's like, does God not exist? Well, he does, because good. Because there's too much good. Way too much good. And, and it's a question of measurement, because obviously a lot of people will very much disagree. The world is filled with horrors, and injustice. And that's true. That is true. But the prophecy is not that it's not, it's that it shall be made right. And the covering that is cast over people, this, and it almost makes me think of the idea of original sin. That there's something, there's all, there's this overarching covering, but I want to come up with a better word. I was tent, but that's another analogy. I wanted an actual descriptive term. I was saying milieu or some, but that's not what I want. Can't think of the word, but there's a spiritual, that's not really the word I wanted, but component that is, it is spiritual, but I don't want to use that term. That's too weak. Not specific enough. But through these spiritual things, through all other means, there exists existing state of affairs in the world, and it affects everyone, all men. It's over all nations. It's of course, we cannot penetrate it. Beyond that veil is God. You know what I mean? I don't know why I didn't just go right to when Jesus was crucified and the veil was torn in the midst of the temple. And hopefully nobody was screaming at their computer about that. Go to the veil in the temple, you! But, there you go. There was that barrier between man and God that Jesus opens and makes a way. And so also the return of Christ will cast away the veil again from off the nations, at least for those who have not known Christ, which is still many. In spite of the nominal Christianity, And also a very wide popular in the world. Christianity is a very popular world religion. I think we're still the biggest, aren't we? The biggest one? Yeah, whatever. They always, I think we are, because they always talk about how Islam is the fastest growing religion, because they like to threaten, just like they always want to tell, oh, whites are going to be extinct in America, or something like that. Like, I like to make you start worrying about carnalities like that. Like, I don't worry about the future of the white race. It's like, how many kids have you had? If you're worried about the white race, why don't you have some kids? Go find a nice white girl and have kids. Sometimes I just get so sick of this, the panicking and the stupid carnality. I mean, there is a carnality in the world about this stuff, and it always annoys me, because I just don't believe in any of that. I mean, I think I said it before. I have my own preferences. I like my wife and my children the way they are. I wouldn't have them any other way. But, and everyone's entitled to whatever they prefer as far as, like, whatever color of the rainbow is your favorite. And I don't mean that in a Pride Month way. I mean that just in a human skin color way. The rainbow of skin colors, and races and humans. If you love someone who looks like a certain whatever, and that's, I have nothing to say. Nothing. I don't mind, what you do with your life is your business, certainly. And I have nothing to say about that. No interest in saying anything about it. Oops. Other than to, I would advise this, that when it matters of love, if you're a Christian and a zealous one, don't marry anyone else. That's for sure. All other things being equal, let that be first. Let that be number one. Don't let any other thing get you confused on that matter. No kind of pretty face, no matter how ideal, no matter how much you think that, oh, it's for me. People sometimes are so carnal and foolish. So, there's that covering. Jesus has already split it in the Spirit, and we can pierce through the veil through the power of Jesus Christ, through the Spirit of God interceding in our lives. We do, and sometimes things do bleed through. And when I got the Holy Spirit, it was a powerful experience. I felt the power of God all over me. Not all over, but I mean, my hands, my feet, my lips, and my ears. And as I've described in other places, powerful, real. Real enough for me. I don't care what anybody else thinks. Don't believe me. I don't care. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm not asking anyone to believe that. I'm just telling you that's why I believe. If you want to think I'm delusional, that's fine. I have no problem. Paul, you're crazy. I might be. Might I not? But you know what? If I was, I wouldn't be able to tell. And so I can only go like. People would suggest, oh, maybe you're some sort of physical, psychical. If what I experienced was just the byproduct of my mind, then like I really want to keep pursuing this, because it was in pursuit of Christ that I did that to myself. If that be how you're going to interpret it, so then like this is what I'm going to derive even more power from this, perhaps, or I can repeat it, get it to do it again, and if I could, I would want if I could just do it at my will. I laugh because actually my hands started to feel it's funny. Maybe not, but I mean a little bit. Actually, because I always feel like that actually the feeling was a lot like just what my body feels like being alive, except like the volume was turned up on certain parts. Like, it's normally there's like a background hum to existence. I don't know, that like I feel in my body. Especially in certain parts, if it's quiet, it's like just the feeling of your nerve endings being alive and all that. It's just everything just went up from like a normal like 1 or 2 to 11. I had to say 11, not 10. Went up to 11. It should have been actually. I should say like 8, or maybe it was more like a 7. And maybe it went from 1 to. I mean, because I can imagine it being a lot louder actually, to tell you the truth. So, but it was definitely significant. It was like going from 1 to 7, something big, or maybe 6. I want to downplay it actually now because I was thinking I could have a greater experience. The Lord could show me even more. And that is for sure. I mean, because it's not like I fell into a trance and saw the Lord or something like that. It was just the feeling. So, to me, it's like the existence of God is more open in that level. He doesn't like daily tell me like, hey, you're getting it all right. I'll tell you, he doesn't do that. That's the reason I say is like, that's what I'd like to know. I'd like you to come and I like him to sit down and say like, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes. And you know what I mean? But it's like the parable of the tares. Occupy till I come. He leaves us in the world. We have the Bible. We have his Spirit. But we have a responsibility to figure out how we're going to get through this. And it is not a light thing. He will swallow up death in victory. And who else but the one who tore the veil? That separation between God and man, that it prevents man. Because all the things in the temple, prior to that veil, there were all kinds of other separations. The inner court from the outer court. You know, and the veil and the Holy of Holies from the not so Holy of Holies. You know, I mean, there's the holy place and there's the Holy of Holies. The outer court, the inner court. You know, there's all the Gentiles even further out, you know. Like they could come a certain closeness, the Gentiles could. But and that's another point. The Gentiles could only come to a certain, they couldn't go into the temple proper. Into the inner sanctum proper. Couldn't do that. Shut out. But through Christ, he opens the way for even a filthy Gentile like me to enter into the Holy of Holies. And I just say that, you know, it's not exactly how it was written in the Bible, but, you know, but that's how the attitude became for some people. Because you were not supposed to despise the stranger. That's not the Old Testament way. You know, there's a lot of laws protecting the stranger in Israel. In Israeli law, there's a lot of laws to protect the stranger. You know, they were to be given equal protection under the law. That's also a biblical concept. I don't know if the whole concept comes from the Bible. I mean, as far as like, because the concept exists of fairness and of justice exists even back to the time of Abraham, and Abraham happened before the Bible was written. So the morality of Abraham's time is prior to the Bible, because no one ever suggests that the Bible, like if you're looking at the most fundamentalist dream of what they think you mean like that their most the interpretation they would favor, if you're going to be like, I don't know, like the one I was first instructed, that the Pentateuch was written by Moses. You know, that Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. It doesn't exactly say that anywhere in the Bible, but they were called the books of Moses. It was written in I forgot. Actually, you know what? I could be wrong on that one. So don't start yelling at your computer screen. Because, and I'm not going to investigate this, but we'll just leave that hanging, because I think that there's possibly New Testament references where it would say in Moses, and it would be a reference to Genesis. But that could be, again, the fact that they call it the books of Moses doesn't necessarily mean they're saying that Moses wrote them. But here's without going into all that, the point is, the earliest anyone ever thinks of these things is being from Moses. You know, they don't think they were lugging the book of Genesis around in Egypt, or that it was written by Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's the idea that the earliest it could have been written would be Moses, and it made the most sense. So Moses was considered to be the author of Genesis, you know, in fundamentalist circles, right? And I don't know, because it's like, I don't know why. Do I have to believe that? You know what I mean, I certainly believe that. I don't know. I'm not going to get specific about it, because actually I have to think about it. I'd want to look into it more, because it's the kind of question I usually leave off. I mean, I looked at it a while ago, right? And I saw that there was some doubt. You know, there's certainly, to say the least, there's some doubt about that assertion that Moses wrote all that stuff. And then, but then I was like, you know, I got more important things to worry about than the writing, because I know the Bible was written by many people. I mean, the Bible itself, that's something the Bible makes very clear, because the books are all Isaiah and Jeremiah and Daniel. And it's like there's not just one author, so I don't expect, in the book of Moses, the books of Moses do feel much bigger than. But then again, I'm not an expert, so I don't want to really comment too much on the Pentateuch. I would say the Pentateuch is the Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy. I don't think I've ever actually done a line-by-line study through. We did do Deuteronomy a long time ago. But not Numbers and Leviticus. A long time. I wonder if I still have the cassettes from Deuteronomy. That's funny. They would be on cassette. In my garage, there are many cassettes of me being a bad teacher. by my own standards today, I think. And God will wipe away all tears from off all faces. That's one of the longing things. So what about the problem of evil? Well, this is part of it. The promise of God is that in the end, He would restore everything. He would take man. Man, is a fallen creature. That's what the story of the garden teaches us. That we have someone fallen from God's grace and live in a fallen world because of that, and we suffer evil and deprivation because of our nature. It's essentially because of our nature. We have a sinful nature. It's not, that's the most, it's like, that is why we sin. That is why. We can't seem to get it right. And we're also blind. Part of that. I say, well, why does God, like I said, I do have studies that go, like if I were to get into that question, I do a lot of diversions already, but and I don't like to be like, I'm not going to go into that now. As you know, I don't usually say that. usually I, without even thinking, charge directly into all kinds of subjects. Why is this not working right? Oh, I didn't transition. I'll just charge in any old subject, right? I'd say for that question, though, specifically, like the problem of evil. The one where evil and the purposes of God, right there. Study number 10 on oraclesofgod.org. It says not secure. That's probably why I don't get as many visitors as I used to. I don't know why. It's because, you know why? I don't take any information on my website. There's no place for you to enter your email. There's no place for you to enter your credit card. So you don't need a secure website. I don't need a secure website. I don't want to buy one. But now there's not secure. It's like, I don't like that they do that. Okay, granted. But why don't you wait for a page on which there's some sort of thing that means something? It's not secure. They know what malicious code looks like. I do. I don't know, whatever. I don't want to talk technical garbage. It's probably really boring. All right. So it's an hour and 46 minutes. That's why, to really lay out this subject, it takes some time. Evil is the primary reason for disbelief. I have often said, blah, blah. I've heard it said this is not true. There's a little introductory part. But there's I thought it was a pretty decent study. It's a little old, but, 5 years isn't that long ago. I do remember that I thought it did a pretty decent job. The love of God is also another corollary study to that one, I would add. And again, these are my edited audio studies, and they are that's an hour and 46 minutes. That's going to be a lot more to the point and on topic. When I do these topical studies, I stick to the subject. And actually, I'd say that also about my there he is. But all these audio recordings, they were, I don't think I'm as good a teacher over 10 years ago, which is when most of those were recorded, over here on the right. The single subjects are all much more recent, as you can see. They're all within the last 5 years. But these other ones, these books, they're old, but they are more dense. I would offer caution, because I do recommend the latest stuff. And because I'm just better. I'm better. I'm a better person 10 years later. I'm a better teacher 10 years later, in my opinion. I think some people may not like me now that used to, but that's okay. I don't know what to say about it, I haven't had a lot of negative feedback on it, to tell you the truth. So whatever. I don't know. I think what it was is I've said this before to my wife. I've listened to some of it because I've gone back. Like, I don't disagree with myself. It's just the way I say things I disagree with. I'm like, it's way too less patient, more angry, less experienced. But doctrinally, for the most part, I don't disagree with much of what I had to say. Just more of questions of emphasis. All right. And of course, this is quoted in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? 1 Corinthians 15 has almost 60 verses or more. There's around 60. There's a lot of verses in that chapter. And I don't remember exactly which one that is. But you should read the whole chapter. Let's see, would it be like verse 56 or something? I'll guess at it. I'm just going to look it up without bringing you along and just give you the verse, okay? There we go. This is for anyone who wants to look it up. And maybe I'll notice. But I mean, yeah. And then, of course, I assume 56. What is verse 56? Oh, I was close. It's verse 55. 55. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? And there are 58 verses in. I thought 58, but then I was like, is that where it ends? But it's verse 56. 1 Corinthians 15, 56. And of course, that's the chapter where he talks about the resurrection in great detail. And, once again, placing the thought here where, in time, we're talking of a very specific point. When that veil is torn away, when death is swallowed up in victory, and wipe away all the tears from off the faces, and the rebuke of his people will he take away from all the earth. Because the rebuke of his people is like, while the veil is cast over in the ignorance of the world, it's like, I get rebuked all the time. People call, I have one guy, he's like, what do you call me, a dinosaur? Because I still believe in God. I thought that's funny. I was like, what did he say? I forgot what he said. But it's like, I forgot what he called me. I'm like, I think of myself more as a living fossil. And I don't know why he thought of me. It's weird because people get this weird. I think people have a weird sense of reality. A lot of people in this world, especially on the internet, because I think they live in cities. I know most of them do. They live in cities. All they know is city folk. But they don't have an idea of what the whole world looks like. And it's not obvious that Christianity is going anywhere. But people think it's literally going away. Or that atheism is going to rise and rule or whatever. I don't think so. I mean, here's the thing I do know. The evil will grow in power. And I'm not sure what shape it's going to take. But I'm pretty sure it's not going to be a strictly rational one. So I'm going to basically say you guys are out. The strictly rational atheists. You won't be... You're going to be victims of the wicked if you don't, be careful. I would just advise, use extreme caution as you go forward in life. Because the evil out there it doesn't constrain itself to rationality and the truth. And that's why evil always has an edge. Or the wicked have an edge in the world. Because you just have an edge when you'll do anything. That's why I have mistrust of people who believe in nothing, because it's like, if you don't believe in God, you have some substitute of belief, but it's like, I believe in doing right because it's right. That's so weak. That doesn't mean anything to me. I believe in doing right because it's right until, there's going to be a point in which that doesn't hold true anymore. It takes a great deal of commitment, like to lay your life down for something you really believe. It takes a great deal of commitment. And I'm not saying that people who don't believe in God can't lay their lives down. They do. But it takes a great deal of commitment. And what are you committed to? And what level of moral uprightness are you truly committed to, of holiness, of integrity to the truth? What level? I mean, it takes a great deal of commitment to truth and to those things, and to maintain your integrity in that, in the face of fierce opposition, in the face of deadly opposition. Because that's what prophets must face, deadly opposition. You know what I mean? Yeah, say things to people that'll make them want to kill you, you know? And it's like, and a lot of times knowingly saying them. I mean, you're saying them realizing that these people are going to dislike what I have to say so much that in their hearts they will wish me dead. I can only hope they won't actually feel strongly enough in that way to take any action. And the thing, that's kind of the reason that sounds so familiar. That I've actually had that thought, you know, about like songs I was writing and stuff. It's like, you know, but not very strongly. I mean, just only as a remote possibility. Because given their way, we know that the wicked would do so. They would do those things. They would murder those that disagree with them. They would. They would love to just get rid of them so they could live out their dream and make the world they think they need to make Sodom and Gomorrah rise again. I mean, that's what they want. There's an article, you know, they want Sodom and Gomorrah to rise, and they want you to give them your children, and you go die. That's what they want. But, and you know what? Babylon will rise, and oh boy, what a wicked mess it shall be. But in the end, despite everything, the Lord will return and bring justice. His vengeance will be swift, and the blood shall flow to the horse's bridle, as it's written. The rebuke of his people, you know, people, you Christians and your bull and your Jesus and your morality and your this and that, and you know, he didn't rise from the dead. They fed him to dogs, and he never was crucified in the first place. He didn't exist. Well, it's kind of like a bunch of the different things I've heard people say. But I called on his name, and his power came into me. So, you're full of it. Literally, I know you're full of it. No, you don't know that, but I do. You know, I've had, you know, it's something funny. I love making that argument, and the thing is, it makes them hate me, and they think I'm a liar. They really hate it because if you're lying, it's a really wicked thing to do. Dishonest in an argument, to like use that kind of a, say like, well, you know, hey, you may not believe in God, but he landed in a UFO in my backyard yesterday, and he said, you know what, I'm real. You know, and then he proved it by taking me back to the beginning of the creation of the world and showing me blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of people who do a lot of, I mean, I've heard people, are they hear from God? And and so with that kind of noise out there of all kinds of people hearing from God, you know, I don't know who to believe. You know, since I have had an experience, now I tend to just be like, I tend to take people's word for it and be like, well, if they're lying, it doesn't matter because I'm already convinced on my own. I mostly just don't like when people try, like, they've had some experience and they need to pound it into me. And that part I get a little bit weird about because, like, I have had something happen and I don't feel like I need everyone to come along to the party and believe. I don't even look for confirmation or nothing. I don't need nothing. Why would I need anyone to confirm it for me? Why do I need anyone to believe that I see the things that I know I see? Yeah, I mean, I don't need that. And it's like, and plus, God gave it to me. If he wanted them all to see that or to experience that, they'd experience it. And so it's mine to make of it what I must. And what I make of it is, it gave me something that I had a bit of trouble with, which was faith. It gave me, because I was in the process of losing it at the time. So I have no doubt the Lord Jesus will swallow up death and victory, will return, because I call on his name, and I tasted of his power. What he could do. It was not much, but it was something. So when he promises to wipe away the tears, I'll take the promise. I'll believe him. And that he'll take away our rebuke. I'll believe it. I'll endure the scorn. Because I do believe he will make good on that promise. I don't like scorn. I would like to avoid trouble. I'd like to avoid, the violence of men. I don't want to be hurt by people full of hate for me just because I believe in the Lord and I believe in righteousness. I don't believe, children should be taken to pride parades and such things, exposed to evil, indoctrinated in evil, are made to walk around with their faces covered. That to me is also evil. Especially because it eventually became apparent that it was just stupid. And it became the power game of a weird little man who is... I'm working on a song called Do You Believe in Science? I mean, I really want to get it done. I have other work I'm working on. I got a ton of songs. I have like 13 new songs. I mean, you've heard a bunch of them, but do you believe in science? And it makes me think of Fauci. It was inspired, because they're always saying, follow the science, follow the science. I believe in science. I just don't believe in scientists. I believe they're lying, scheming, greedy little men. That's what I think. Not all. Well, not all scientists. Hashtag not all scientists. But science is corrupted by them. By so many of them in the midst of the scientific work, it is corrupted, and their words are corrupted, and they've damaged themselves again. By this. I pray that shall be the case. That they should be brought into disrepute. The schools advocate child abuse. They do. They do. And it shall be said in that day, Lo, this is our God. We have waited for him, and he will save us. This is the Lord. We have waited for him. We will be glad and rejoice in his salvation. For in this mountain shall the hand of the Lord rest, and Moab shall be trodden under him, even as straw is trodden down for the dunghill. Moab was a nation that rejoiced often at the misfortune of Israel and sought in many ways to cause misfortune to happen to Israel. Beginning with Balaam, who taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel. And here's the thing. You may think, wow, we were talking about the end times. And all of a sudden they just throw Moab in. And it's weird because I was like, boom, sucks me right back to the 6th century BC. Or 5th. I forgot which one we're in. Well, it's 0 to 100 is the 1st century. 1 to 2, okay. How do we get there? How do we get to Moab? Well, what's interesting about the mention of Moab is what I was saying about Moab. It's mentioned in the 7 churches in the book of Revelation. Which is a really, like that. Like that incident comes up. And the fact that, where are we? I want actually the Bible collection. I don't want to look at the meaning of words. I want to go just to the Bible. Let's not show you in Revelation what I'm talking about. I mean, you probably know Balaam who taught, the funny thing is I know the words better than I know where they are. Balaam who taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed unto idols, and to commit fornication. There we go. Balaam. Now Balaam, you remember, you've heard of Balaam's ass, right? The donkey, right? And make sure you don't get that confused. Balaam's ass that spoke, right? He was on his way to Moab. Balak, the king of Moab, hired Balaam because Balaam was a prophet, and he hired him to come forth and to curse Israel. And he was going to do it. He was a prophet for hire. And on the way, the Lord sent an angel to slay him. And the ass, seeing the angel waiting in the way, was trying to deviate and take the prophet away from the impending doom, because the ass could see the angel. And Balaam started getting mad and hitting it, and so then the ass speaks to him. Why do you treat me so? It's been a while since I read the passage. I realized that I still don't have. Did I not have that up the whole time when I found the verse? I'm sorry. I read it, but then I didn't actually show you. It's right here in the middle of the chapter. Balaam who taught Balak to cast. I had it a second ago. Balaam who taught Balak to cast the stumbling block. There we go, verse 14. But that goes back. But it goes back to the book of, I believe, Numbers. Balaam and Balak. Let me see. It was when the children of Israel were entering in the promised land. So maybe it was actually, well, was it? It's either number. I guess maybe it's not Joshua, is it? Oh wait, I want to just search the Pentateuch and throw in Joshua. So now I'm just looking for the Pentateuch and Joshua. Numbers. It is Numbers. Balaam the son of Beor to Pethor, Baal Peor, call. Yeah. Balak the son of Zippor, unto Balaam thou shalt not go with them. Yeah. Wait, was Balaam with the ass? There we go. The ass saw the angel of the Lord. Yes. Yeah, Numbers 22. So you can read all about that. But that gets brought up in Revelation. And that has to do with Moab. In fact, if I go back there real quick, to the Numbers 22. Go back. The children of Israel set forward and pitched in the plains of Moab and this side of Jordan by Jericho. So they're camped out there in the plains of Moab, and Moab were sore afraid. Balak the son of Zippor saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites, and Moab was sore afraid of the people because they were many, and the Moab was because they had just destroyed the Amorites. But God had given them a commandment because Moab was their cousin. They were not to disturb Moab or their land, or to take any land from them. He said, I've given this to the children of Lot for an inheritance. So while Israel was often dominant over Moab and Ammon, and they fought each other, they never went on any sort of war of extermination. Like they did to conquer the Promised Land. They exterminate the Amorites and several other groups. Maybe not several other groups, but the Amorites were specifically to be destroyed. Explicitly. It explicitly calls for their complete destruction, genocide. And so, and of course, the reason I laugh is like, oh, you're just going to leave that there? You're just going to say that? You're just going to leave that out there? That it was genocide? Well, of course, because he said kill every one of them. It's not so much genocide as culturicide or whatever. I mean, genocide, whatever. Every genus dies. Every man dies. All men are... Here's the one thing. If anyone has the right... what I do is I yield this. I don't call for, people to take the law into their own hands, and I certainly don't do it myself. We should, if we want violence... if we want violence to be done to someone, we should use the law. Because that is the way in which it's done. You don't just, meaning violence, but like someone defrauds you, you sue them and obtain a judgment, and then you can use the violence of seizure. You can you can seize funds from their bank accounts. Eventually, it's a process. It takes a while, or seize assets. You can find a way to get legal permission to use force, or to pass law. Like murder, it's illegal. And also, if you do it, we will come with guns and take you away, and put you into a cell. And if someone needs killing or violence done, meaning they need to be taken prisoner or whatever, things that we don't do on our own, then that's the way to do it. But and same thing, and But there are some things to which men have no right at all, like things like just exterminating whole groups of people. Men have judged even themselves unworthy of such things, and we put men on trial who commit war crimes and genocide. And men are not permitted to do such things. But I would say God is permitted to do whatever he wants, because God is always right. You know what I mean? If God does it, it means it is right. Because if God exists, he is good, and he is right. Most of the problem with atheists is that they'll argue that he isn't, because they'll be arguing about their misunderstanding of the Bible. They read the Bible, they don't understand, and then they'll argue about it. So, well, the Bible has genocide. It's like, well, God is not a man. It's, of course, it is. The flood is the first genocide in history. You know? And God explicitly commits it on all mankind. And there's a message. That's what they don't get. They don't understand that you forget you're dealing with God, not men. And yeah, God will kill us all. And he'll be right. And it'll be good. You understand that on some level, exterminating humankind could be considered good. Environmentalists think so. You know what I mean? It's only through the grace and mercy of God we have another breath. He'd be fully justified in getting rid of us. And some humans would rejoice. You know, they have no pity on their fellow men. It's like, yeah, I know we're terrible, we're irredeemable and terrible, but God has chosen to redeem us in spite of that. And so, you know, you can, you know, thumb your nose at him for doing so, but I'm kind of thankful. And that's meant to be sarcastic by way of underreporting of my enthusiasm. I'm exceedingly thankful. All right, just like this verse, you know, we've waited for, you know, I'm waiting for the Lord. We endure the shame. We endure the reproaches. Sometimes, you know. I mean, I don't think I've had a tremendous amount of reproach, but, you know, I can't say I've gone without it. So that's good. It's good in a sense because it helps. I'm glad I go through some. You know why? Because I know it can be much worse. And having experienced a little of the reproach of the enemy, it makes me see how ill-equipped I really am to deal with the enemy. But it also, at the same time, prepares me a little more. And that's good. So it's like, I don't despise the fact that I don't live, that I didn't grow up in the most, you know, exciting times. I don't know. I look on it less, you know, life seemed mundane. Everything seems so, you know, just the way it ought to be when you're young, I think. At least to me it did. I mean, the world just seemed like it was just going on its merry way. And it seemed kind of unchanging. But now in my life, I've lived in it long enough to watch the world change. And it's a little disturbing, I gotta say. I mean, I don't know that it's, you know, that all of it, of course it's not all bad. We will be glad and rejoice in his salvation, because it's good. His hand will rest. And remember it says, the hand of the Lord is stretched out still. For all this, his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. This is a promise that God, in the end, will rest from all of this. That there will be a point at which God's hand will cease its workings. At least in all of this confusing veil covering the nations, death, you know, living under the shadow of death and fear of the unknown. God's hand will make a full work. He'll finish his work, and we will thank him. He will, the nation, you know, how long, O Lord? You know, I was thinking when I was talking about Isaiah 6, the blindness comes, and the prophet, how long? Until the cities be wasted and without inhabitant, right? Habitant. Thou hast made of the city a heap, of defense city a ruin. You know, he's remembering that. And he shall spread forth his hands in the midst of him. Ah, my people. Right? As he that swims. That's what but that's not the kind of... Swimming is more like dog paddle. That's what they said in my Bible. It says in the East, they all swam making a lot of... Remember, it's like writing. They didn't have the technique down yet. They didn't have breaststroke. And I mean, people just kind of swam. Didn't have swimming class at high school or as kids. You know, I just remember going to swimming lessons in the summertime on days like it was cold this morning. I remember going to swimming class at like 6 in the morning, and it's like, I mean, it probably wasn't 6, 7 probably. It was early though. I know it was early because I was getting up early in the summer to go into a freezing swimming pool, and I hated it. I mean, I loved swimming, but I hated getting in the freezing pool first thing in the morning. Yeah, and obviously the context here, you don't need to know that the people in the East swim weird. You know that there's different kinds of swimming. And the most common is kind of a dog paddle, right? I mean, that's the most instinctive swimming that anyone does because dogs do it and so does every other animal. They just basically run underwater. You know, use your hands and your legs as if you're climbing the water. I'm glad I can swim. I've always been actually a really good swimmer. I float very well. I am very floaty. So, at least I used to be. I don't know. Maybe I'm not as floaty anymore. I haven't been in the water in a bit. Well, if I exhale all my air, I will sink to the bottom. I remember I used to do that. And then you go all the way down. He shall bring down their pride together. So obviously, whatever he's doing, this hand maneuver is going to be the bring down their pride swim. You know? The swimming that brings down the pride with the spoil of their hands. You remember that reference to Babylon, Mystery Babylon, Revelation, all the merchandise and the spoils. You know, it has to do, because a lot of what the world is about is merchandise and spoils. It's greed and lust. All the world is just embroiled in greed and lust. That's what the problems of our world are stemming from, the lust and the greed for things. You know, like I said, the love of money is the root of all evil. Is not the root, but is a root of all evil. I think it's the proper. Oh no, it's like it is the desire of man, the coveting after value. You know what I mean? That is the root of evil because people want things they can't have or that don't belong to them, and they don't want to do. Well, here's the thing. The way society works is when people are willing to do what's lawful to go after they are, we can have society. I mean, because it's not just a question of lust. We have things we need. So we have to be able to work for the things we need. And the world is also, but the problem is, once we have everything we need, we then go back, we then start thinking about the things we long after. That's when we get into trouble. Because it's not the love of food that's the root of all evil. You know what I mean? It's the love of money, of something that's of value outside of what I can consume. Or what I need to consume. Having food and raiment, let us therewith be content. You know? And all the spoils of their hands is what they want. My stuff, with their spoil. You know, it makes me think of, I remember there was a video that guy recommended me, because I have strange taste probably, of a guy who got killed. He dropped his cell phone in an icy lake and dove in after it just without thinking. And I could see how someone could do that on a split second. You know, I mean, I've done that. You know, there are funny times when I bring in my own experience. But, like, yeah, I've thrust my hand into a toilet or two to grab a piece of electronics that I dropped. But I don't think I would thrust my hand in the lake, but I don't think I'd be diving in. God forbid I should fall in. Then he immediately went into shock and died because he didn't get out. Moab being trodden down, even straws trodden down for the dunghill. You know, I didn't comment on that much, but I don't see much. You know, it's just a simple simile. You know, they'll be trodden down. Yeah, you know, they were given. This is the thing. These are people who were given every opportunity to not have God be wrathful with them. You know, they're given every opportunity. From the beginning, they're reacting, you know, I mean, obviously, if you watch your neighbors get genocided, it might cause a bit of nervousness on your part. And you may not be particularly, you know, receptive to their assurances, like we won't, but not you, you know, because that's just the sort of thing someone would say right before they lull you into a state of complacency. Don't worry, we're not coming for you, you know. That's what they said. Don't worry, we're not coming for your children. Don't worry. Oh no, we just want to have marriage. That's all we want. But on some level, you can't stop them. You can't. You have to get it to where everybody stops them, or nobody does. You know. I don't think we're gonna go back to Sodom and Gomorrah, but because I think that like trying to bring us back to there, that's not gonna work. It's just like this whole like trying to overthrow our country into some sort of bizarre communist revolution. It's like, you know, that's not how they won the election. So it's not a popular idea. So that's a good thing. For the short term. Because for the short term for our nation, I don't want to see it falling into hell. And if it did, I'd like to think that was the end of the world. If my nation is going to fall apart, I'd like to think that the whole world is going to fall apart too. Now, there's no assurance of that. America can go absolutely to hell. You know, absolutely. We can just right off a cliff. Just like other nations in the past have. I hate... We think we're special. We are special, right? They were special too. The Mongols were special. Everybody... The Huns were special. You know? The Third Reich was very special. They all have their place in history, don't they? And so do we. And we can, you know... What do we want to be? You know? That's the thing. What do we want to be? You know, I know what I have to be. You know, I know what I have to do in the midst of it. I can only figure out what I have to... Boy, that fan's gotten loud. Whatever, at least it's the end of the study. And then, you know what's funny? It's actually louder on the microphone. I wonder if there's some sort of shield for it. Whatever, we're done. The last verse... The fortress of the high fort of thy walls shall you bring down, lay low, bring to the ground even this. Thy walls. I think if it's in this mountain, unless it's Mount Moab, which I don't think. Well, here's the thing: is like. I don't know. I'm not sure about that part right there. Like, I still say this mountain is Jerusalem. And Moab is just a side note. Just to the enemies of God's people. Who made themselves enemies unnecessarily. Like, they didn't have to be the enemy. You know. The fortress of the high fort of thy walls shall I bring down. I think that refers to Jerusalem ultimately. Because Jerusalem is destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. I forgot the year. You know, after the Assyrian captivity and after Judah is rebuilt, because after the Assyrians, you know, they do a lot of deportation and killing. There's a time, as it was prophesied, there would be very few people left. You know. And so the fortress of the high fort of thy walls. So thy walls. That's the part. I'm like, okay, he doesn't really talk to their pride, their hands, the nations. And here's the thing. Let me just put this point out there. It says in the New Testament that Jerusalem will be trodden down of the Gentiles till the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. That at some point Jerusalem has to fall into the hands of the Gentiles. Or maybe it is right now. I mean, as far as you could reckon it. Even though Israel controls all of Israel just about. Well, not all that ever historically was Israel. But they control Israel. They don't control the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Or they do, but they don't. You know what I mean? If you know anything about what goes on in Israel and about the Temple Mount, you know that without getting into tons of specifics, well, I don't know exactly how it works, but Jews can't go up on the Temple Mount and pray. I think they can get up there and do certain things, but but they're not allowed to go to the Dome of the Rock. I mean, there's so many restrictions on them, right? And that's technically where the holy is and all that stuff. It is trodden down of the Gentiles. It's still being trodden down. You know what I mean? Though they control the whole rest of the city. So I don't know if that counts or not. Does that count? Is that still the time of the Gentiles? Because they're still holding on to that? It makes you feel like it is. And you see, Satan himself longed to, on Mount Zion. I know we're way over, whatever. I'm finishing this chapter. On Mount Zion. We're almost done. On Mount Zion, he promised he would... I'm sure it was almost 9. In the Psalm, we read in Isaiah 14, right? I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God, I will sit also on the mount of the congregation, the sides of the north, all that stuff. Satan's going to have his moment through Antichrist, whether that be him literally or whatever, it doesn't matter. The Antichrist figure will rise, he will have that place. He will, in the sides of the north, beautiful for situation is Mount Zion in the sides of the north. And Satan will ensconce himself spiritually or whatever, in whatever form you want to see that. The Antichrist will exalt himself above all that is God, called God, that is worship, so that he, as God, stands in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. He will stand in the place where Christ is supposed to stand. And where Christ is supposed to return to Jerusalem and in this mountain do all these things. The Antichrist will do it there. That's why a lot of people, when they talk about the Antichrist, they'll mention guys like Antiochus Epiphanes, who sacrificed a pig on the altar. The Greek, one of the Greek rulers who attempted to Hellenize the Jews, which was obviously resulted in a lot of resistance. Okay, and so. There's two, what I was saying before though, last point, 2 Jerusalems. There's heavenly Jerusalem, right? But there's also the Old Testament, there is the whore Jerusalem. And Mystery Babylon, I didn't get to this point early, but it was a point I was making in that early thing. The Mystery Babylon is also the whore. I mean, it's also Jerusalem in a way. And that city is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. They're like, Babylon is Rome. Not exactly. That the city that reigns even above the kings of the earth is the city of London. Because for some people that is the banker city. The merchant city. And they say, he's finally getting it. I don't know. Because I think that in the end, wherever that Antichrist puts his seat is that thing. And it will be on Jerusalem. So Babylon will be Jerusalem. And that's why people won't see it. They're going to say, Babylon? It's the kingdom of God. Are you kidding me? Anyways, that's all we have time for today. Thanks for joining me in this study. We'll begin chapter 26 next time, on Monday.
And in mercy shall the throne be established. He shall sit upon it in truth in the tabernacle of David, judging and seeking judgment and hasting righteousness. We have heard of the pride of Moab. He is very proud, even of his haughtiness and his pride and his wrath. But his life shall not be so.